Hi, welcome back for the second in my series about how these sculptures work. And today we are shining a spotlight, literally, on the Mobius Wave. You've probably taken a strip of paper and looped it around itself with a half twist and drawn around with a pencil and discovered that without leaving the page, you ended up on the other side of the paper. Well, I started thinking that there was a wave that was traveling through the plane of the Mobius strip. By the time that peak got all the way around, it would become a valley. Now, having a peak the same thing as a valley causes some serious conceptual problems, especially if you spent, like me, the last 20 years making wave sculptures. And when I first started thinking about waves in terms of math and sculptures, I was thinking about that kind of wiggly line that you make in trig class. And then after a while, I started to think of the wave as the natural path between two extremes. And so take for example, day and night. If you look at how many hours there are of light, as the season changes, you'll get a waveform. And that wave right there is the path between day and night. It's the path between heat and cold. It's the path between cowardice and courage, between happiness and sadness. Then, the more I worked on these sculptures, the more the wave itself seemed to get substance and gather strength. And after a while, the wave became not just the path between extremes, but the thread that binds them. Without the wave between them, night and day would fly apart. It was the wave that's holding everything together. And so what does it mean if a valley is the same as a peak? If they're indistinguishable? There would be no path between sadness and happiness because they would be one and the same thing. I mean, is this a world that you could live in? Is this the world that we do live in? Now, if you're thinking, Rubens just making stuff up, trying to make his sculpture sound a lot more interesting than it is, you're right. And you're wrong at exactly the same time. And that is the beauty of the Mobius wave. So down low there's an electric motor, and it's turning a swing arm that's rotating a thimble. Thimble is pulling on strings, and the strings are going through a circular pattern that is picking out the phases of the wave. And I realized fairly early on that if you did an exact number of wavelengths into the Mobius strip, it would be a discontinuous waveform. And so in this case, I did 3.5 wavelengths, or 7 pi periodic, to make a continuous waveform, even when a valley is turning into the peak. By far the funnest part of the math was figuring out this strip right here that winds all the way around and provides the distribution points for the Mobius wave. And it turns out that if you take a Mobius strip and the edges of it all lay on a torus, and a torus is like a donut shape, and a torus actually has a very straightforward parametric equations. And so once I got my head around those, it was fairly easy to figure out the 3-dimensional points that would correspond to all of the distribution points for the wave. The question though was how to make this strip that went all the way around. And I got thinking, well, what would this strip look like that wounds around the torus? What would it look like if I folded it flat? And so I calculated what the shape would be if it were flat, and it came into this sort of funny S-shaped curve, and I couldn't tell for sure that it was gonna wrap around the torus, but look plausible. And so I got a jigsaw, cut it out, made a wooden frame to hold all of these rings in place, and then bent the strip around the torus shape, and it just lay in perfectly. And it came back around and it perfectly connected to itself, which was probably the most satisfying moment I've ever had with math and sculpture, was just to have this solid piece of metal wrap around a torus and come back and connect. From there, I put the strings in, put the pieces of wood and the strings that are returning the motion, and turned it on. So I think that pretty much sums up the Mobius wave, or does it?